We're off to see the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz. Because.
This is Movie Night. Hello and welcome to Movie Night, YouTube's #1 movie review show. I'm your host, Jonathan Paula. Tonight we'll be traveling to the wonderful world of Oz as we review the unofficial film trilogy that takes place there. Beginning, of course, with the Hollywood original, The Wizard of Oz. This supremely iconic fantasy adventure film produced by MGM during the height of the Hollywood studio system was released in August of 1939, eventually grossing nearly $300 million in adjusted dollars with the aid of several re-releases. Perhaps more impressively though, the Library of Congress named this the most watched motion picture in history, thanks largely in part to frequent broadcasts on TV since the 1950s. The Wizard of Oz is practically unreviewable, so steeped in lore, nostalgia, and American culture, reducing it to nothing more than a fun kids movie is an insult. Judy Garland stars as young Dorothy Gale, a wayward teen who, following a traumatic opening act where her dastardly neighbor attempts to forcibly euthanize her dog, is swept away on a violent tornado to the magical land of Oz. While Technicolor films had been around for years, the breathtaking single shot when Dorothy enters the land of Oz in bright, beautiful color completely transformed the way audiences would look at film forever. A brightly colored landscape littered with talking animals, witches, munchkins, and many other unique features, like a yellow brick road, sleep-inducing flowers, or the majestic Emerald City itself. Frank Morgan, Ray Bolger, Jack Haley, Burt Lahr, Billy Burke, and Margaret Hamilton round out the giant cast, the majority of which undergo impressive makeup changes as well.
Hooray! We're off to see a wizard!
Oh, well, you're not starting out very well.
Oh, I'll try. Really, I will.
To Oz?
To Oz!
We're off to see the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz. We hear he is a whiz of a whiz, if ever a whiz there was. If ever a whiz there was, the Wizard of Oz is one because of the wonderful things he does. We're off to see the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz.
As the whimsical and plucky Scarecrow, Bolger was the last surviving principal cast member, having died over 26 years ago. When asked if he received TV royalties from the film, he often remarked, "No, just immortality. I'll settle for that." From Dorothy's legendary ruby slippers that now sit in the Smithsonian Museum, to syncing the picture to Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, to a ridiculously insulting and absurd hoax involving a suicide caught on film, this innocent 101-minute film has deeply permeated into society. Although much of the dialogue is pretty hammy and poorly delivered, 3 of this film's lines are featured in AFI's Top 100 Movie Quotes, with Judy's famous quip, "Toto, I've got a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore," placing 4th. The playful characters frequently sing catchy music, with Garland's beautiful rendition of Somewhere Over the Rainbow scoring the well-paced adventure one of its 2 Academy Awards. Despite some terribly rigid and formulaic scene progression, the incredible MGM sets and backdrops are breathtaking, and the visual effects were revolutionary. The consequences are overtly established early, but with no true sense of time or ticking clock, much of the plot is advanced only because the song is over, and it's time to skip along to the next area. Under some scrutiny, a number of plot holes hurt this picture as well, especially the more glaring example involving the Wicked Witch's only weakness being readily available right inside her own castle. It's also unfortunate these characters are some of the most memorable in cinema, as none of them are truly developed beyond very basic stereotypes and plot devices. It is a 74-year-old children's film though, so it's easy to overlook these faults. Arguments can certainly be made for The Great Train Robbery, Gone with the Wind, The Godfather, Star Wars, or even Avatar, but for my money, The Wizard of Oz is the most important film ever made. But I'm certainly not saying it's the best film ever made. Either way, let's check out what you had to say about this film in the YouTube comments. The Ratomatic for The Wizard of Oz, a double 10. While many acknowledge some of the flaws and dated visuals, it is difficult not to recognize this as a truly remarkable and timeless classic. We both agree, this film is simply amazing. And now for a new feature, a weekly poll question to help spark some non-review related discussions for a change. Tonight I'd like to know, who is your favorite character from The Wizard of Oz? Leave your response as a comment below. I honestly didn't know our next picture even existed until several of you mentioned it following last week's episode. But Movie Night is a dynamic and audience-involved program, so now here's my unplanned bonus review of Return to Oz. An unofficial and quasi-sequel to the 1939 original, this Walter Murch fantasy adventure film came out in the summer of 1985, but failed to earn back even half of its $28 million budget. 6 months after returning from Oz, little Dorothy is a depressed and conflicted child who is admitted to a mental health institution after repeatedly obsessing over the land of Oz. But when she once again unwittingly returns to that magical realm, she meets a whole new cast of quirky characters far more inventive but ultimately less interesting than their original counterparts. With the Scarecrow, Lion, and Tin Man only making cameos here, the new group of friends include an annoying talking chicken, a wind-up robot, a pumpkin head man, and a sofa with a deer head on the front. These colorful characters are perhaps the film's strongest component, all brought to life with impressive visual effects that scored this 113-minute film an Oscar nomination. The vast array of inconsistencies this purported sequel has with the original film are unsettling, however, not the least of which being that Dorothy is now played by Fairuza Balk, a much younger and creepier actress than Garland's version was.
You'll be sorry for treating me like this! I'm a terrible person!
I am only a machine, so I cannot be sorry or happy, no matter what happens.
Where's the Scarecrow? And what's happened to the Emerald City?
Answer her. Answer
The Gnome
her.
King! The Gnome King! He conquered the Emerald City! He took all the emeralds! He turned everyone to stone!
What about the Scarecrow?
There's only one person that knows where the Scarecrow is.
Primarily featuring unknown voice acting talent, most of the performances are rather rudimentary and bland. With Oz transformed into a hellish, depressing landscape following Dorothy's exit in the first movie, one character remarks, "If this is Oz, I'd rather take my chances back in Kansas." The simplistic plot offers plenty of thrills and excitement, even though our heroine's quest lacks a goal or deadline. Dorothy just sort of aimlessly wanders around picking up friends and avoiding capture. Far too frightening at times for its target audience of children, this film's darker, non-musical tone doesn't always feel right. Similar in style though to the superior Labyrinth that was released the following year, this listlessly paced experience is best suited for braver kids in search of a fun, zany, and bizarre story. One that bears little resemblance to the MGM classic. Perhaps more enjoyable if I was 20 years younger and unaware it was even a partial sequel to a far greater film. This PG-rated movie is not one I'll likely watch again. Return to Oz. Unfaithful presentation, but visually intriguing. As this was a bonus review, there weren't any audience comments for it, so let's go right to the Rate-O-Matic for Return to Oz. A 5. This film was all over the place. Some of the action sequence and visuals worked well, but the terrifyingly different and darker adaptation of the story was an unwelcome and ineffective one. Ultimately, it's too scary for children and too goofy for adults. A fun capsule of strange 80s fantasy films, I thought it was just alright. Now, a word from our sponsor. I've been a Netflix user for 8 years now, and I love being able to instantly watch thousands of movies on any number of the devices in my home. Whether I'm on my desktop PC, my Nintendo Wii, my Western Digital TV media box, my Sony Bravia flat screen, or just using my smartphone, and I'll bet you'll enjoy it too. Help support Movie Night by grabbing yourself a free 30-day trial membership by visiting netflix.com/jogwheel and sign up tonight. Finally, let's discuss Oz, the Great and Powerful. From acclaimed and accomplished director Sam Raimi comes the latest big-budget IMAX 3D adventure adapted from classic source material. 2 years ago, Tim Burton gave us the disappointing but wildly successful Alice in Wonderland, and it's easy to see the similarities with this heavily computer-assisted 130-minute adventure. A spiritual prequel to L. Frank Baum's novel and indirectly to the 1939 classic, this PG-13 rated adventure unexpectedly soars when many lesser attempts would have faltered. The talented and frenzied James Franco stars as the title character, a small-time circus magician and charlatan who suddenly finds himself whisked away from 1905 Kansas in a terrible tornado while riding in his hot air balloon. And a lovely and immensely effective nod to the original, the movie then transitions from a drab black and white 4:3 frame to a vibrant and breathtaking colorful 2:1 aspect ratio, aided wonderfully by impeccable use of 3D and comfortable editing, truly bringing the Land of Oz to life like never before. Since Disney doesn't own any rights to the MGM version, this film doesn't feature as many familiar elements that fans of the franchise might like. You won't find any ruby slippers, musical numbers, or talking scarecrows here. The stunning visuals alone are enough reason to check this movie out, which I predict will quickly break the $1 billion mark. Mila Kunis, Rachel Weisz, and Michelle Williams all play familiar witches, with one eventually transforming into the green-skinned, water-fearing menace we all know and love. When that actress does transform, however, it is plainly evident how miscast she was in the complicated and iconic role. As Oz's trusted assistant, Zach Braff lends his voice to a flying, talking monkey, and a role that surprisingly works really well. His jokes are funny and he never gets too annoying or stupid, which is why the character's near disappearance from the picture halfway through was an unfortunate development.
Wait, I got it. Or turn around and go back. You'll come clean. You apologize for lying about being the wizard and for lying to that poor girl, okay? You gotta really seem contrite. You gotta sell it. Maybe you can even cry. Can you cry? I could cut up an onion.
Not going back. We're gonna find this wicked witch, steal her wand, I'll get that big pile of gold, and you can have a nice pile of bananas, all right?
Bananas. Oh, I see. Because I'm a monkey, I must love bananas, right? That is a vicious stereotype.
You like bananas?
Of course I love bananas. I'm a monkey. Don't be ridiculous. I just don't like you saying.
Franco excels in the lead role, perfectly balancing the charm of a stage performer with the regret of a con man wishing for more, confessing early, I don't want to be a good man, I want to be a great man. When he's rather spectacularly transported to the world that bears his namesake, it provides him with an opportunity at redemption. Few of the other characters, which also includes a beautifully rendered CGI talking China doll voiced by Joey King, or veteran Bill Cobbs briefly featured as an old machine tinkerer, receive any substantial background. Although it loses steam a bit during a longer middle portion, the explosive grand finale is extremely enjoyable, as it conjures up images and memories of the famous scene with the man behind the curtain. Danny Elfman's whimsical score works great right out of the gate, as we're witness to a clever opening credit sequence in the style of string puppets and cardboard cutouts. This PG-rated fantasy has plenty of fun moments for the entire family, delivering a truly enjoyable experience that is faithful to the tone and wonder-inspiring visuals of the original. Despite some narrative and pacing missteps, Oz the Great and Powerful is visually stunning and wonderfully familiar. Now let's read some reviews from the movie night audience. The Great and Powerful Oz, a double 8. You love the visuals, but weren't as impressed by Kunis's character, ultimately scoring this film a great. I thought this was a beautiful, inventive, and faithful adaptation to the essence that made the original so spectacular and memorable. Time will tell if this adventure has the same staying power, but it worked really well. I thought it was great. Now let's check out some other movies currently playing in theaters with some of your tweet critiques. If you see a new movie in theaters, tweet your review with the JPMN hashtag to have it featured on the show. Next week we'll be celebrating St. Patrick's Day with some Irish-themed movies. 1992's Far and Away with Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise, the action thriller Boondock Saints from 1999, and Gangs of New York featuring Leonardo DiCaprio and Daniel Day-Lewis. Let me know what you think about these movies by voting in the polls below or by leaving a comment review. And please subscribe to the Movie Night Archive channel for exclusive trailer commentaries and an organized library at all our past reviews. Once again, my name is Jonathan Paula. Thank you for watching Movie Night. I hope to see you right back here next Friday.